Anyway, listen, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. This is a bit of an auspicious occasion because it's the last episode of the 4th season of us doing Mortgage 101. And that, to me, is that's significant. We've done a lot of these things.
Yeah, we've certainly done a lot of these. And, it's the end of November now when you're hearing our show. And, it is still financial literacy month. So we're really going to still talk about, what financial literacy, means to us and how you can keep financial literacy going through the holidays and into the new year. And, I think we're going to talk a lot about, what we talked about all year. And, I think we're going to do a little bit of recap. And we have a guest. We have a guest coming on as well.
James Dwyer. He's been on my radio talk show on a regular basis.
And we've had him also on Mortgage 101.
He's been on Mortgage 101 and very insightful. He knows the market very well.
He's a realtor here in Halifax with Engel & Volkers. And, we're going to get his perspective of what's going on here in the market in Halifax. As we all know, in Ontario, things have been very soft, Todd.
Yep.
We're getting reports, obviously, from professionals in Ontario. And we've obviously reported that on the news and on our show. And so I'm curious to hear what James has to say about Nova Scotia, and really what's going on here in Halifax. So we'll hear from him a little bit later in our show as well.
I'm often curious. There's so many brokers or biz companies out there. Whatever you just mentioned one in particular. There's some real staples. Exit all. Does it? I've heard that it's not necessarily got anything to do with that. It's about the realtor themselves. The personality, that's really what matters.
I think there's nuancey differences between different, real estate brokerages. Some maybe offer more services, some offer less. The offering is very similar, I think, across the board. I think, when you're buying or selling a home, at least from my perspective, from the mortgage industry, you spend, let's say 5 hours with me maximum, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes you spend 40 hours or more with a realtor. So I think it's really about the personality fit. And I think it's also about someone that you think is going to be looking after your best interests. It's the biggest purchase of your life. You want to have someone who's an expert. And I usually recommend, a couple of names, when I'm giving a referral. I think someone who lives and works in the area that you're looking to buy, I think that's valuable. And I think it needs to be a good fit and someone that you think is going to work on.
Yeah. So for you, it's not just automatic. Here's this one.
Here's the one. Here's the best.
It's you have a number of people and you make that fit work.
We deal with different realtors every day.
Yeah.
Todd, as you can imagine, obviously we kind of have our go-to people that we do more transactions with because it's a relationship business. Just like there's certain lawyers that we do business with every day, certain lenders that we do business with every day. So, I think this certainly is a relationship business. And I think, when you're buying a home, I think having a really great realtor on your side makes a huge difference. I think back in the day, some consumers would want to use the listing agent when they're buying a home because they think they could maybe get a bit of a deal.
Right.
But the listing agent is really giving the loyalty to their first client, which is the seller. And in Nova Scotia, if you were to use the listing agent to buy the home, you would then not have any brokerage representation. You would actually come in, just as a customer, you would have to make all the decisions and give all the direction yourself, and you can't lean on them for advice because they are giving advice to their client, which is the seller.
Yeah. Concerning people selling their own properties, this is kind of in vogue for a while. It never really catches on a big scale, and I can only assume the reason why it doesn't is because, and I'm not dissuading anybody from doing it.
Like FSBO, are you talking about? Like for sale by owner?
Whatever it is. We've seen some of these pop up, or even people just buy a sign and put it on the front lawn and say, I'm going to save all that money. There's got to be a reason why it doesn't happen more often, and I'm assuming because these things don't go well sometimes.
I'll tell you why people use a realtor. I think one, they sell faster with a realtor. I think they sell for a higher price with a realtor. The realtor is providing more protection. And, a lot of private sales don't work out, Todd.
How about, what do you mean protection? And what do you, explain what you mean by that?
Well, just think if you're selling a home, you have to bring strangers into your home. They're not vetted. You have no idea who these people are.
Right.
Yeah. And I think with a realtor, typically there's two realtors working together to facilitate the transaction. So there's a lot more layers of protection within the transaction.
Yeah.
And if something goes wrong, hopefully it doesn't, but if something does go wrong, you have professionals there to help work it out. And, you're then separated from the seller. It's a big financial transaction. It can become very tangly when things go wrong. Personally, I would never not use a realtor.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I've bought and sold a lot of homes, and you never meet.
I have to.
Yeah, I understand. But it's interesting that you don't meet this often, or almost never meet the sellers, or they don't.
Very rarely.
But it kind of, like you said, it takes that personal touch out of that, which is a good thing, because you don't become invested in an emotional way with these people at all. Right?
Exactly. Just think if you're hammering them and you're going to negotiate and whatever, if you have that connection, that becomes more challenging, right?
Yeah, that's right. Or they bring their kid in, and the kid's, oh, I love this room, and you're showing them, and then suddenly you like them, and you're going to give them a better deal.
I don't know if that really happens. I think sometimes they lean on, if you really love the house, well, you can pay full price, or you can pay a little bit more. Maybe there's a little bit less in negotiation. So I always recommend you have your own representation. Yeah. And I think your own representation for someone who's going to be a good fit for you. Yeah. I think the fit is so important.
Yeah. I guess what I'm getting at is that realtors often, like in a lot of professions, you probably get a lot of, you make all this money and you whatever. But the reality is that these jobs are to protect you, and as you've said 1,000 times, the biggest purchase of your life that can make or break your financial future.
100%.
Right.
And I think that's really, they're there to protect you as a client. And when you use a realtor as a buyer, you don't pay them. It's a seller who pays both sides. Yeah. So I think having your own representation certainly does have a value, and I can't stress enough that you really need to find someone that you're going to, mesh well with.
Do you think we have a good blend right now of realtors in the province?
I think it's like the 90-10 rule or the 80-10 rule. Yeah. It doesn't matter what type of, business you're in. There's a certain percentage that are doing the bulk of the transactions, right? And I think, having someone who has experience obviously has a value, especially when you're really looking for that protection. And I think it's a very tough time to be a realtor right now. Even when it was really, really busy, Todd, they sometimes had to make 20 offers to get one successful transaction.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just so uber competitive. For me, I would never envy them. I don't think they have an easy job. I think some consumers think they just go and they unlock the door, they make an agreement, and you're done.
Right.
No, in some ways, they're kind of acting like a little mini lawyer by making these financial, agreements that are binding, and they're giving advice. They're arranging inspections. They're dealing with mortgage financing, like with us, and it's a very complex role, and I think it is very, very challenging. And my hat really goes off to successful realtors, because it's a tough gig.
And at times they have to tell people bad news, right? You're the bad guy. You're the bad girl.
Very often.
Yeah.
And I think in my role, oftentimes I'm the happiness maker. So I love what I do. Obviously, I love mortgage lending. We've been doing this for 4 seasons, and there's always something new to talk about, which I think is exciting. And the one thing about mortgage lending is I get to see my clients, I think, a lot more. Usually realtors are very transactional. You do one transaction. Unless you're buying and selling all the time, you don't see the realtor again.
Yeah, exactly.